That's my pile back behind me. It doesn't fill up and clean out every day. I try to dig into it whenever I can. My name is Ron Ainspan. I'm the owner of Mountain Food Products in Asheville, North Carolina. We're a wholesale produce company selling to a lot of the food service establishments in the area. Well, in the beginning, it wasn't really Mountain Food Products. It was just me being a delivery guy, bringing local food products around to a few stores and restaurants. At the time, I was farming, and I was selling my produce to a few local restaurants. There really weren't many at that time, and about 4 or 5 others who were interested in distributing their products got together to think about a way to distribute products. And it was approaching the end of the farm season. It was late in the year, and I offered to be the delivery guy. So one thing led to another, and I began to go to Atlanta on a regular basis. And the original idea of distributing local food products locally as the only part of it was supplemented with basically access to the world's vegetables and fruits. And so we began to distribute everything that we could that was fresh to local restaurants.
Well, I wasn't here from the beginning. I came on probably, I want to say, about a year or so after. Ron just went around. I was actually working in a natural food store, and that's how I met Ron. He was coming over there and selling, asking what we needed, and he would go to Atlanta and pick it up and then deliver it. And then Mountain Foods was starting to evolve, and the store that I was working for went out of business, and so I just needed another job, and I interviewed with him. And at the time, I was a single parent, and it seemed like he was willing to give me the hours I needed. So I just thought it was going to be a real temporary, or maybe a couple of years I would work there and then move on. But it seemed to have continued for, I think I'm going on like 22, which is it's a long time in one place.
Well, Mountain Foods is now at the Western North Carolina Farmers Market. We've been here since 1995. But in the spring of 1995, we were in a warehouse in what's now called the River Arts District. At that time, it was just somewhere down by the river, and it was really out of the way, and it was a very funky old warehouse. But the old warehouse was really something out of the past. It had formerly been the Earl Chesterfield Mill, which was a grain mill, and it was a place that many people worked in the 40s and 50s. We moved in there in the mid-'80s after we'd been going for about a year or two. It had nooks and crannies and all kinds of old corners that you could hide in. My kids were small at the time, and they used to love to play down there, play in the puddles in the loading dock below the loading dock, put pennies out on the railroad tracks and let the trains run over them. Many good times were had along the railroad tracks. One Sunday morning in April, somebody set a fire in that building, and that warehouse and several others burned down.
That was crazy. I was on a Sunday, and I was with my son, who was a little guy at the time, and we were coming back about 5 o'clock from from a lake that was towards Hendersonville. We were with some friends, and we're driving in on 26, and we see this smoke, and I'm going, where is that coming from? And we get closer and closer and closer, and all of a sudden going over the bridge, and I look down, I see the warehouse on fire.
One of my employees called and said the warehouse was on fire, and I just couldn't believe it.
I'm like, oh my goodness. And so I drove around, and the police wouldn't let me go down. And then they said, well, I said, well, I work here. And they said, okay. So they let us drive further down, and then we got out of the car. And as we got out of the car, there's Ron and Copper and one of his kids walking up the road. And they're just like everybody's really sad. And he said, it's gone. And I go, oh my goodness. So I ran home, changed my clothes, came back with some friends, and we just were all in front of the warehouse watching it burn down. So it was pretty intense. It was a very emotional, intense day.
We drove the 10 miles into town and down to the warehouse, and everything. The wind was whipping. It was 20 or 25 miles an hour winds that day, so there was no stopping the fire. and then really we had no idea what we were going to do. How in the world could we continue the business?
Ron made a decision. He said, there were 5 of us, I believe, that got together about 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning over at Denny's to make a decision, were we going to continue or were we done? So we decided we were going to continue. So I can tell you by 12 o'clock on Monday we were over here. Someone had loaned us a space to be in. My van became the office, and we were running all over the place getting orders, and we just continued. It was just running. It was pretty intense, but you know, there was a vision. The vehicles didn't burn down, so that was really the deciding factor. Had the vehicles gone, I think the business would have been done. The
fire happened at a very unique time in our history, which was April of 1995. So the fire was started on a Sunday morning, and there was a particular accelerant used to create the fires. They know it was set. The following week, the Richmond Hill Inn, not the old house, but they were building an extension to the Richmond Hill Inn, and the same accelerant was used in starting that fire. No one was ever found to have set it, but there was like a string of fires, and somebody was doing it. The Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Division of the federal government was investigating the fire here, but they were only here 2 weeks, and the Oklahoma City bombing of the federal building happened, and everybody cleared out, and really there was almost no investigation beyond that.
So yeah, it was a very emotional time. We would get together periodically to talk about our feelings, because it was so much to endure at one point. You know, you work for a company that is like a family. That's what was so different also about being over at the old warehouse. You know, you just dealt with yourselves, you know, and you spent a lot of time together. The community was extremely helpful, you know. They were taking care of us, and we were just looking, and we talked to the actual people that were working here were our competitors that closed, and we talked to them about taking over the space, and they said okay.
We were able to actually make deliveries the next day on product that we borrowed, product that was coming in space that was lent to us, and everybody cooked food for us and came and brought things for weeks until we settled back into a regular routine again.
I think it just pretty much got back on track the way it was before. I definitely like the old warehouse better than I do here. This is the most practical place to be for a produce company. That was the most fun place to be for a business.
Yeah, I'm sure there's always things that you can change, but a lot of things have worked out really well, and it's been satisfying.